Oh, hi. Oh my god. Hi, hello. The first thing that you see is me being scuffed. Hi. Oh no. Let me just lower the volume of my. Oh no. There we go. Hi. Good evening. And today, I am cosplaying as Kitagawa Marin. Um, as you can tell by my swimsuit. And this coconut in front of me is some sort of censorship. I'm an old fashioned lady. Hello, what's up? Oh, you're too drunk for this? You didn't give me any alcohol. I was actually supposed to get some wine, but I forgot to bring wine. And maybe this is for the better because I also have work tomorrow. So, how have y'all been doing? Well, as I always say, you can always just call me mommy. Everyone does that. So I'm quite used to it. So, how is everyone? How was your Monday? Did you do good in work or school? Or at home? I don't know what y'all been up to. Personally, I have been, well, working, yes. And I was supposed to stream this morning at 9 a.m., but I overslept because, well, things came up last night and I slept way too late. So here we are with an evening stream, which kind of works out, I think. Hi. Hello. Welcome aboard. So, today we are going to continue reading the book we've been reading. Well, it was a few weeks ago. I've stopped for some reason. Mostly it was just poor time management. So, hello, Prince Bibi. So, again, we are going to read The Philippines, a Past Revisited by Renato Constantino. And I think I've already said this during my last stream, but I think that it is very important to contextualize history, and therefore I chose this one because it puts history in a different light, because we've always been reading history from the point of view of maybe the Americans or other people, because our pre-colonial history, it's not that well documented, and what we have of it today is done mostly by those people who colonized us. And on one hand, it is great to have those accounts because that's all we have aside from word of mouth passed on from one generation to another. Hello. Welcome to my stream. As I was saying, although that is great, it is also important to realize that a lot of written history of our country is written in the eyes of someone who was not very familiar with the culture, and that would cause them to use certain words, pass some judgment, and compare our culture back then to their own culture. And yes, another thing. What was I saying? Yes, context. Renato Constantino is one of the writers that inspired a lot of young people back in 1890s. I mean 1980s. Wait, I'm getting my numbers mixed up. Wait, 90. Yes. um, That's a revolution. His works have proven to be a catalyst of change for the people who have read them. Oh, before you sleep, you decide to share with us this fact. Thank you. I I have thought about this quite a lot when I was younger because when I was younger, we had a shop. I'm not going to tell you what kind of shop it is, but right beside that is a roasted chicken shop. And yes, people order half a roasted chicken, and I'm like, so they're sharing the other half with a complete stranger. Interesting, but hold on. Where is my. All right. So, since we have all settled down, might as well start reading. But for those of you who are going to sleep, good night. And for those who are lurking, maybe successful in whatever you're trying to achieve right now. It must be very, very important. And for those of you who are here to listen to me read this book, sit tight. We are now going to read chapter 6 of this book. Again, the book title is The Philippines, A Past Revisited, written by Renato Constantino. And we are now on chapter 6, Monastic Supremacy. The Spanish Empire was deemed to be in the service of both majesties, God and King. This concept was the basis for the union of church and state into one structure, which, in the words of De la Costa, might be viewed either as a civilizing church or a missionary state. The royal authority over the Spanish church was based on the Patronato Real, under which the king had secured from the Pope the right to make nominations to most of the bishoprics and abbacies in Spain and in her dominions. So if you would compare this to our form of government today, obviously it's very, very different, as today we have a separation of the church and the state. But back then, during the Spanish era, the church and the government is basically intertwined. Oh, thank you for the hydrate and the stretch. Let me stretch first. And let's hydrate. It's great that I put this coconut right in front of me. Let's continue reading. Any dual authority, however, is bound to give rise to jurisdictional disputes and to goad one or the other power into extending certain favors to individuals or groups jointly controlled in order to gain the upper hand in the rivalry for allegiance. In their struggle with the popes for jurisdiction and control over the Spanish church, the kings granted the church lands and other privileges and extended certain personal immunities to the clergy and even to their servants. As a rule, therefore, the clergy were inclined to favor the king, to whose generosity they owed their rents and dignities. Many clergymen became royal counselors. So as you can see, the church and the basically government whose power comes from the king is very, very tight, because the church people were inclined to favor the king because they owe them a lot of things, basically. Spiritual and temporal sovereigns. The Spanish Church became a powerful and influential factor in the theopolitical enterprise that included among its ventures the colonization of the Philippines. Miyaki, I meant the actual fruit in front of me, the coconut. And oh, Nelly, how do you want me to curse at you? Twice? Would you want that to be in Filipino or English? Or how would you like me to curse? Let's do that. Both language. Oh, do you want me to curse you like witchcraft? I mean, I can do that, but I do not want you to experience any adverse effects. Okay, let's settle for something a little less than an actual ritualistic curse because, for any intents and purposes, I do not perform rituals on anyone. You may talk to my lawyers. But anyway, fuck you. Oh, I don't curse people in Latin, but I do Latin prayers if that's. So one more. Would you like that to be in Filipino or in Korean or what other languages? In Chinese or in Ilocano or wait, I forgot the other languages that I curse in. Putang ina. Anyway, let's continue. Enough with the curses, children. We have to go ahead and continue with our learning process. Oh, who redeemed that? Who redeemed the good boy, good girl, good luck? What? Who? Who is this? All right, I will need to go to my video producer thingy so that I know who's redeeming what. Because I am getting very, very confused. Hold on, let me see. It loads forever. Oh, it's you. Magindara. Honey, darling. Magindara, you're a very, very good girl. Is that what you want? Is that what you want from me, girl? Let's continue reading. Where was I? I forgot where I was reading. Okay, let's just go back to the top. The Spanish Church became a powerful and influential factor in the theopolitical enterprise that included among its ventures the colonization of the Philippines, our country. But despite its uniquely national character, the Spanish Church still drew its sanction from the Pope, who extended moral dominance over church affairs all over the world. The religious missionaries who accompanied the conquistadores represented the spiritual sovereign, although they owed their benefices to the temporal one. The religious orders came to the Philippines. Oh, Nelly, you're a good boy. Please listen to our lesson for today. Thank you. On the strength of an understanding between the Pope in Rome and the King of Spain. So, as we can see in this chapter, it's really all about the duality of the power that they are exerting on the Philippines. Because on one hand, you have your king, and then on the other, there is the Pope. And the clergymen were exerting that power both from the Pope and from the king. And yes, it's a whole lot of mess. To bring the light of Christianity to the natives was to be the primary justification of the Spanish presence in the island. So if you would remember from our last meeting about this, I'm treating this as a class. Oh, thank you for the follow, Mike Tempest. Wait, I think I know you. Wait, I know this person. I just can't remember. Let's continue because hello. Welcome to our stream. We are reading The Philippines, a past revisited by Renato Constantino, and we are now in chapter 6. Where was I? The Pope stipulated that the Spanish king, as an ardent patron of the church, should see to it that everything was done so that the religious orders could effectively carry out their mission in the islands. In exchange, the Pope recognized the king as the legitimate arm of the church west of the Indies. Under the Patronato Real, the king, as patron of the church in these islands, was to have the authority to determine the limits of the mission territories, and to have a voice in the assignment of missionaries. He also had the duty to protect the missionaries and provide for their support. This made the friars salaried employees of the Spanish king as well as representatives of Rome. As we were talking about earlier, the power of the friars came from two directions, which basically agreed that yes, I will give you the, what do you call that? The mystical or the God justification of your colonizing of these lands, but you have to make them Christians. That was basically the intention of the church. And then for the king, it's like, okay, I get their approval and I'm basically justified. These are my lands now. So that is why back then the friars are in power. So it makes very, very little sense today because we are very used to the separation of church and the state. But back then it was a very, very different situation. Clerical ascendancy. Oh! Mike is in My Neighbor Mike, the one who brings flowers and poisonous potato. I will never forget my first day on the new server. Someone brought me flowers and one singular poisonous potato. I'm like, I don't know if they're welcoming me or wishing me to die. Anyway, we are reading again. Let's continue. Clerical ascendancy. The setup in the Philippines reflected the situation in Spain. In the colony, the church was even more completely under the king's control, although, paradoxically enough, the clergy in the islands were more powerful than the king's official administrators, because the latter were so few in number, and because the friars played such an important role in the pacification campaign. So, you know how there were also officials sent by the king who were not from the clergy. But why are the friars or the clergy in power? It's because there were basically more of them. And then there's also the fact that they were the ones who were actually dealing with the people. They were talking to them. They were trying to learn their language. They even made several different dictionaries: Spanish, Spanish Tagalog, Spanish, some other Filipino language. So it was a more direct contact with the natives back then. So that grants them more power because they are the ones who are basically looking over them. There is no doubt that many of the early missionaries were sincere and zealous in their priestly duties, but by the beginning of the 17th century, there had already occurred a decline in morals and in missionary enthusiasm. This may have been due in part to the deterioration of the clergy in Spain itself. So, again, context. In the beginning, it's not like the friars went here, they were already mistreating the natives. No, a lot of them actually wanted to spread the word of their God. So, what happened is that, as years went by, power corrupts people, and also there were a lot of other things happening in Spain because, they're all coming from there. The great demand for priests in the new dominions of the Spanish Empire and the economic and social privileges granted to the clergy by the king were two factors which brought about a lowering of the standards of the priesthood. The urgent need for more priests caused the training period before ordination to be reduced. The clergy's power and wealth made priesthood an attractive career rather than a spiritual calling. So we can say that the first priests who went here were actually there because they wanted to be priests for godly reasons, for religious reasons. But later on, they were basically mass producing priests, just like the Philippines used to mass produce nurses because it was an attractive career financially. And so, when you mass produce something, sometimes you cut corners. And for the priests that went here, what happened is that they have less training and a lot of them are less sincere about the evangelization part, but they are more looking at the financial gain of it. You'd be a priest to get a free ride to the tropics? Oh, maganda na. I've thought about that. Would I be like a nun just for kicks, for shits and giggles? And the answer is no. I'm too fucking wild to be in the church. I don't even go to church. Where are we now? Hold on. There we go. Since entry into the religious orders had become comparatively easy, the numbers of ecclesiastics increased, although many of them continued to be businessmen, lawyers, administrative officers, and even jugglers and buffoons. So you see, these people were not there because they wanted to be priests. They were from many different trades. They just decided that this is more lucrative, being a priest, so let's go become a priest and go to the tropics, the Indies as they call it. And yeah, as you can see, since they're not very religious people, the morals went really, really low. Decadence set in, many religious led licentious lives. Even the mendicant orders lost their early ideals of poverty and self-sacrifice and devoted themselves to the pursuit of wealth. The practice of baranganeria was rampant. The nuns of Seville and Toledo even held beauty contests. So, because when you are a priest, you have like different orders, right? There were orders that are like, those Buddhists. They're kind of like that, but they're Catholic. And they're supposed to be living in poverty, like wanting not any of the riches of the world because they're trying to live a pure life to sacrifice for the people. But even those who were put in those orders, they were basically not following any of that. They were acquiring riches and bitches. So that is why you have a lot of children of priests back then. You know about Maria Clara, right? That thing. So that is in the book because that was very rampant. Like the priests who, by the way, are not supposed to get married or get their dick wet or whatever. They were basically getting all the women, whichever woman that they like in the place they're placed in. So yeah, it wasn't very holy, not at all. And even, yeah, the nuns of Seville and Toledo had beauty contests. If you know anything about nuns, the first thing about nuns that you will notice is that they will always have a very fucked up haircut in the beginning of their careers. It's like they just fucking chop it all off. They're not supposed to be pretty. Like that's against their ideals. They don't wear any makeup. You're not supposed to like see their hair. That's why they're wearing that I don't know what you call it, but you know, the official non-uniform. They're covering their hair because those were their ideals, but things were not going very holy in Spain back then. And same is true here in the Philippines because these are the same people who are going here. Mission rivalries. In the Philippines, one indication that considerations more worldly than missionary endeavors occupied the friars' minds was the inter-order rivalry. So there was rivalry between them. So for those who are not Catholic, not familiar, there are different orders. There are like Augustinians, Dominicans, and Franciscans, many different flavors of friars. So it's the Augustinians who arrived in the Philippines first. They were the first religious order in the Philippines. They arrived with Legazpi. They tried hard to prevent the coming of other religious orders. So the Franciscans, the Jesuits, oh, that's what I forgot, the Dominicans, and finally the Recollects, nevertheless succeeded in establishing their own missions. Although the entry of each one was opposed by all those who had previously established their foothold in the colony. They were assigned different territories, but still, among the various orders, doubtless have their origins in Spain. So they're really looking at it as, you know, this is my territory, the riches and the wealth that we can acquire from this is only ours. We don't want to share with other orders. Instead of thinking of it as, oh, we are just helping each other convert them into Christianity or whatever, because that was like the cover story, right? Other factors conducive to moral decline arose from the local situation. So these are the factors that are, you know, specific here to the Philippines, separate from whatever is going on in Spain. The very enormity of the task of Catholicization in comparison to the small numbers of missionaries bred discouragement and apathy. The dispersal of the missions made supervision by superiors difficult, while the increasing administrative duties the friars took on in the native communities soon relegated proselytization to the background. The assumption of administrative functions by the clergy was both an expedient dictated by the small number of Spanish officials and an expression of the union of church and state. So, in other words, it's not just because there is a union of the church from the Pope and the state from the king why the Spanish friars were also doing administrative duties. It's also because the people of the king was small in number, so they need manpower. That's where the priests come in. They also do the administrative duties, so they're not just spiritual leaders, they're also basically political leaders or something. And yes, although there's more of them compared to the people of the king, there's still too many islands in this damn place for them to conquer. So there was like low morale. So when you are working in such a situation where you are made to do things that you're not used to do, like you're not trained for this. You were trained as a priest. Now you have to do administrative duties. Like you're not going to do a very good job. But the fundamental cause for the waning zeal and ensuing corruption of the friars was their acquisition of property. A letter to Governor Dasmariñas from Bishop Domingo Salazar dated March 21, 1591, recounts in passing how the religious in Mexico obtained the revocation of a royal prohibition against their owning property. The religious contended that there were too many disadvantages in having the friars live alone. They proposed the establishment of houses to be manned by at least 4 ecclesiastics, but this raised the problem of their support, declaring that they did not want their missionaries to be a burden to their flock. The Dominicans and the Augustinians suggested that the best solution would be for the king to grant them some estates in the native villages so that the missionaries could become self-supporting. This proposal ran counter to a royal order that the clergy should not own lands in the Indian villages. But the religious, through Bishop Salazar himself, succeeded in persuading the king to revoke this decree. So we have talked about this in the past stream, that they were not supposed to, own lands. They were there to make the natives accept colonization easier. They were not supposed to partake in the owning of lands because the lands belonged to the king. And there was a decree for that. But now that there are, basically they're saying that our pay is shit, our situation is shit, we need better compensation, and we can do our jobs better if we own land here. Where are we? The friars in the Philippines had the same privilege to own lands in their parishes for their support, since the Pope had exempted them temporarily from their monastic vows so that they could man the parishes until such time as a secular clergy was available in sufficient numbers to take their place. The combination of these two factors provided the religious corporations with the opportunity to amass large tracts of land. So, yes. So the Pope was like, you know what? I know you're not allowed to own land in a foreign place, but I will temporarily exempt you. So those who are in places like Mexico and the Philippines, you can own the land temporarily until such time that there are enough local priests. So secular clergy just means a priest who is from that place specifically. So Filipino priests, if there are enough of them, they could take your place. And yes, that's how the religious corporations got a lot of land. Soon enough, the clergy were replacing the encomenderos whose cruel exactions they used to denounce. Because in the beginning we had the encomenderos, and the priests were like, encomenderos bad, they abuse the locals. Now they're kind of taking their place. Mode of acquisition. How did the friars become wealthy landed proprietors? One of the earliest means by which the friars acquired their landholdings was by royal bequests. They also bought lands from the state. Later, when the concept of individual property in land had become established among the inhabitants, because remember, back then, the Filipinos didn't really have, well, the natives of the Philippines, they were not yet called Filipinos back then. They didn't have a concept of owning land as a person. The land was owned by the community. They are allowed to use the land. They divided the land equally, but it's not for ownership. It's like, when your mother buys a toy that is for everyone, like let's say a board game, not one child owns the board game, but everyone can use it. It's kind of like that. But when the Spanish came, they started to adapt this concept of ownership of land, because these colonizers have been scrambling to own land. So yeah, where are we? The clergy benefited from this development in a number of ways. They received donations and inheritances from pious Filipinos, a large portion in the form of deathbed bequests. And when we say deathbed bequests, that means that there's a dying man talking to the local parish priest, and we don't know if they really said that they're giving their land to that parish priest, or they're like, oh, nobody else is here. Nobody heard him say anything. The man probably just croaked, saying nothing, but they're like, oh, he said that, that land that he owns, he's giving it to me specifically, or the church. And they're framing it in such a way that it's just basically gratitude, because they're pious. Oh, it's here. In gratitude for their religious ministrations, and as a sort of down payment for a place in heaven. It was often said that friars were wont to whisper into the ears of their dying parishioners that a timely donation to the church would secure for them a shorter tenure in purgatory. There must have been more than a grain of truth in this popular belief, for in the American colonies, for example, the crown issued a royal order prohibiting the friars from drawing up wills for members of their flock. The king likewise barred priests and their convents from inheriting property from those they habitually confessed. The friars also bought land from the natives with the money they obtained from church fees, from trade, or from the profits gained from the produce of lands which utilized forced labor. Again, forced labor. With their prestige and power, it was easy for them to pressure villagers into selling them their lands at very low prices. Hold on, let me just I have way too many things opened all at once, and I need to close them to optimize our stream. Let's continue. From partners to landlords. Other land holdings were acquired through the foreclosure of mortgages. The story of how friars became mortgagees often began innocuously enough. Living as they did among the people, the religious were in the best position to appreciate the possibilities of agricultural development. Where are we? Seeing that the obstacles to more extensive cultivation was lack of capital, many priests entered into partnerships with farmers, advancing them money for seeds, work animals, and tools. The priests received half of the harvest. Although this arrangement favored the moneylender, who received a fat share without working, at least he ran the same risk as the farmer of getting little if the harvest was poor. But when the dependence on priestly capital had become more or less established, the friars began to demand that their advances be regarded as loans, payable at a fixed rate of interest, whether the harvests were good or bad. The risks were now borne by the tillers alone, and in bad seasons they ran into debt. So you can see that there is a big change on their relationship, because before they were basically partners. They're like, okay, using your money, I will till the land. So there's money from one side and effort from the other side, and they will split the earnings in half. If you earn well, both of you will earn well. If the harvest is bad, both of you will basically lose money. And that is a partnership. But later on, it became more like basically they are lending the farmers money. So you know how that goes. There is a percentage expected, whether or not you actually earn from your, what do you call this, from your crops. So if it so happens that there is a storm or a drought, that doesn't change the fact that you will owe the priest money that they lent you. Plus, it's not just that, there is also a, what do you call this, an interest. So a lot of the farmers were going in debt, just like today, because this still happens today, not with priests, but with people who have money, who lend the farmers money to basically earn a living. But when things go bad, all the brunt of it is received by the farmer. Where do we go? When such debts accumulated, the friars forced the farmers to mortgage their land to them and eventually foreclose the mortgage. Now, if this is all jargon to you, it just meant that if a farmer has enough debt, like too much of it, what would happen is that the priest would own their land, basically like it's giving the deed of sale or the certificate of the land to them. Like, if I don't get to pay until a certain amount of time, they would be owning the land forever. And that happened a lot. The friars then obtained title to such lands, and the farmer owners were either driven away or became tenants. So imagine, from actually owning the land that you are tilling, after not earning enough, what happens is the priest either sends you away, or now you will be paying rent. You're now renting the land that you used to own. It is interesting to note that as early as the reign of Philip II, from 1556 to 1598, I think that was his birth and death year, I'm not really sure, a law had been enacted forbidding such mortgages and setting a limit to the amount that could be lent to the natives. This law, like so many other similarly well-intentioned ones, was virtually a dead letter. It was later revoked at the instance of the friars. So basically, things were illegal. So there's a limit to how much you can do this, but when it comes to the friars, that didn't apply to them. It was revoked. Another statute that was also ignored was the one that reserved all lands within 1,000 meters of the principal marketplace of every town as the communal property of the town residents. Many pieces of real estate within this perimeter became friar lands. So, this is very similar to what is happening up to this day. The rich people, they get to bypass some laws. And back then, the friars, since they were in power, they also bypassed some laws, whether it's like a one-on-one thing between them and farmers, or laws that include communal property. They hold that much power. Outright land grabbing, another familiar theme. Some friar lands were obtained through outright usurpation with the help of corrupt surveyors and other government officials. Religious corporations were able to expand their land holdings. Additional hectares of land outside original boundaries of friar property were simply gobbled up each time a new survey was undertaken. Many times, the priests just claimed pieces of land, drew maps of them, had them titled, and set themselves up as owners. The original native settlers who had tilled the land for years were summarily declared to be squatters. When the natives protested, they were asked for legal proofs of ownership in the land in question. More often than not, they could not show any legal document attesting their ownership of the land. The natives did not have títulos reales since their claim to the land was based on de facto possession, meaning their ancestors have owned the land for many generations. It has been passed down to them. They have been tilling the land since time immemorial, but because they did not make land titles back then, remember, the government before the Spanish, it was not one singular thing. There was no such thing as government, really. It's more like little communities. So there was no need to put land titles. They just assumed that this was a communal property of their society, and then these foreigners come and the concept of land owning becomes a thing, but they still didn't really have the initiative to put a land title because, again, that was a foreign concept to them. And then these friars just like come in and swoop with their land titles saying, oops, you don't have a title to this. I guess this one's mine now. So yes, land grabbing. Let's move to the next one. Let me just drink. Hold on. Oh, thank you for the hydrate. That's really in time. Okay. Let us continue. Hold on, let me just get my patterns of land tenancy. The friars were in the main absentee landlords. Supervision was usually entrusted to a lay brother of the order. The estate was parceled out to lessees or inquilinos who themselves had subtenants to work the land. The inquilinos paid a fixed lease or canon in money or in kind. The kasamas, or subtenants, received half of the harvest after the fixed rent was deducted, while the inquilino, the middleman, received the other half. As is usual in a hierarchy of exploitation, the fellow at the bottom bore the brunt of it, since only he actually worked the land and therefore supported with both his labor both inquilino and clerical landlord. The inquilino served much the same purpose as the cabeza and gobernadorcillo, that of facilitating the exactions of his master. Like his counterparts in the political hierarchy, the inquilino, as economic intermediary, shared in the benefits of exploitation and could sometimes manage to amass enough wealth to buy some lands from impoverished native farmers and become a landowner himself, while retaining his lucrative position as inquilino of a religious corporation. Seeds of discontent. The royal bequests by which the religious acquired their original landholdings already wrought an injustice on the natives, since each bequest meant that they were being dispossessed of their ancestral lands, which still happens today, by the way, not by colonizers, by people who are also Filipino. When in addition, the friars used a variety of questionable means to enlarge their estates, one can well understand the smoldering resentment of those who till the soil, because who will not be mad at this? These were lands that were owned by their ancestors. That's hence the name ancestral lands, and they were the ones tilling it. It's their blood, sweat, and tears that cultivated this land, and then here come these friars and inquilinos, and basically, yes, it's how capitalism works, but also at the same time, it's a very, very bad practice of capitalism. One can imagine the feelings of those driven away from lands they have tilled for generations, or forced to work as tenants on their own lands, simply because a mortgage had been foreclosed or the land had been fraudulently resurveyed in someone else's favor. For that matter, even deathbed donations and straight sales of land could also be sources of grievance if these lands had been obtained by the use of the moral influence and the power of the friars. So yes, a lot of them were angry about this, although they cannot really voice it yet. Now we come to friar abuses, taxes, tributes, exorbitant rents, and arbitrary increase of the same, forced labor and personal services. All these intensify the hardships of natives who now had to give up a good part of their produce to their landlords. In addition, some administrators practiced other petty cruelties which caused much suffering among the people. In 1745, in the Jesuit ranches of Lian and Nasugbu, Batangas, for example, the people accused the religious not only of usurping the cultivated lands and the hills that belonged to them, but also refusing to allow the tenants to get wood, rattan, and bamboo for their personal use unless they pay the sums charged by friars. In Bulacan, villagers complained that the religious cheated them out of their lands and then cruelly proceeded to deny them the right to fish in the rivers, to cut firewood, and to gather wild fruits from the forests. The friars would not even allow their carabaos to graze on the hills, since the religious now claimed all these areas as their own. In Cavite, Manila, and Bulacan, small landholders complained that since the friars owned the land through which the rivers passed, they had to agree to the friars' terms if they wanted water for irrigation purposes. Lessees of a friar lands protested bitterly that their landlords raised their rents almost every year, and particularly Whenever they saw that through the farmers' labor the land had become more productive, in some cases they even imposed a surtax on trees planted by the tenants. When they accepted rental payments in kind, the administrators of the friar estates arbitrarily fixed the prices of these products naturally at lower than prevailing prices. So these are just some of the abuses of the friars. And this is just like the tip of the iceberg, because this is on the financial abuses. We are not even talking about the physical abuses. We might talk about them on this next part. Sidelines and other abuses. Aside from institutional exploitation, exactions of a personal nature were rampant. Curates charged a bewildering number of fees for all sorts of rites, from baptism to burial. The natives paid even if it meant selling their last possessions, because they had been taught that such rites were indispensable to the salvation of their souls. Friars made money selling rosaries, scapulars, and other religious objects. They required from their flock all kinds of personal gifts and gifts of food for the covenant table. Priests often administered corporal punishment, meaning, physical punishment, usually whippings on natives who dared disobey their orders or disregard their caprices. Unmarried girls were compelled to report to the convent to pound rice and sweep the church floors. You know where this is heading. The large number of Filipinos today who have a priest somewhere in their family trees attest to the frequencies which the vows of celibacy were transgressed. And I don't want to say the R word here, so let's just say a lot of non-con happened, and that's why there were mestizas born to unmarried women. Of course, the cruelty, capriciousness, and frequency of abuses depended on the character of the individual priest. You can't just say all of them did this same exact thing. And there were good and bad. However, it cannot be denied that the virtually unchallenged power of the friar in most communities had a corrupting influence on most. The people's mounting resentment led them to commit various acts of defiance. They refused to pay the unjust taxes imposed by friar estate administrators, and finally some of them resorted to armed rebellion. So serious were the clerics' abuses that by 1751 the king was moved to issue a royal decree ordering local government authorities to exercise hereafter the utmost vigilance in order that the Indians of the said villages may not be molested by the religious, and that the latter should be kept in check in the unjust acts which they may future attempt. So it was really a big deal, and the king knew about it, and they were like, holy fucking shit, these priests are out of control. Here is a decree, better fucking keep them in check, these horn dogs. But by that time, such a directive could hardly be enforced. The friars had become too powerful, not only because their spiritual hold over the Spanish officials and the natives, but also by virtue of their established economic power, because they've been land grabbing and other shady things to get more wealth and land. In addition, they had become a ubiquitous presence in the local machinery of administration, so it was hard to keep them in check because they were now the ones in power. Let us continue. Economic power. Okay? Wait. Nani? Against the power of the friar landlord, a tenant found it impossible to prosecute his interests or have his complaints heard. A poor tenant could not afford the costs of a lawsuit, just like today. Granting that he knew the first thing about litigation procedures. Besides, what chance had he against such a powerful figure as a friar? If a friar wanted a tenant evicted, the cleric could easily prevail upon a judge to issue the order, and he could just as easily avail himself of government forces to execute the decision. Recalcitrant tenants were often evicted en masse, like a lot of them. There were so many landless peasants to take their places anyway, because of all the land grabbing, and they were being driven away. If you drive away this peasant, there's so many out there who could do their job. So that's why the peasants or the natives were afraid to voice out their grievances, because what would happen to them after? Exploitation, with its concomitant personal cruelties and abuses, was part and parcel of the imperative of property expansion once the friar's right to property had been recognized. Economic power enhanced political power, and political power was used time and again to expand economic power and to oppose any attempts by government to frustrate economic expansion. By the end of the Spanish occupation, the friars were in possession of more than 185,000 hectares of about 1/15 of the land under cultivation. So it was a big deal because it's basically 1/15 of the land that they are cultivating. It's being owned or possessed by the friars. Of this total, around 110 hectares were in the vicinity of Manila. The Dominicans held the estate in Naik in Cavite, in Laguna, the estates of Calamba, Binyan, and Santa Rosa. In Bataan, the estates of Lomboy, Pandi, and Orion, I'm not really sure how to pronounce that. The Agustinians held estates in Cagayan, Isabela, and Nueva Vizcaya, and property in Manila, Cavite, and Bulacan. The Recollects owned an estate in Imus, Cavite, and another in Mindoro. The approximate areas of these religious estates were as follows: 49,293 hectares in Manila, 15,961 hectares in Bulacan, 1,999 hectares in Morong, now Rizal, 404 hectares in Bataan, 19,991 hectares in Cagayan, 6,642 hectares in Cebu, 23,656 hectares in Mindoro, and 22,838 hectares in Isabela. The largest of the friars' haciendas was in Calamba, where Jose Rizal's parents were inquilinos. Jose Rizal's family was like well off, with 16,414 hectares, and the next largest was Pandi with 9,803 hectares. If this was an actual history class, these are numbers you would be memorizing, but I would tell you that you don't need to memorize them. Not at all. The only thing that I want you to take away from this is that a lot of land has been grabbed by the church during the Spanish era. Like, you can pick 15 random hectares of land. One of those would belong to the church. That's how big it is. Besides being large landowners, the clergy participated prominently in the commercial life of the country. One conduit for this participation was the Obras Pias, foundations which derived their funds from the bequests of wealthy churchmen and lay persons. The earliest charitable foundation was the Hermandad de la Misericordia, originally endowed in 1596. These funds were to be invested in commerce, and the income therefrom used for the pious and charitable purposes designated by the donor. With such a capital, which was periodically augmented by new donations, it is easy to see how influential the clergy were in the commercial field. These foundations financed trading ventures to China and India. Alcaldes and governors borrowed money from the obras pias to engage in business within their jurisdiction. Even the government had recourse to these institutions when it found itself short of funds. Shippers on the galleon trade were financed by these foundations. In fact, while the galleon trade existed, this institution invested most of its funds in the venture, not only as a financier of others, but as an authorized recipient of a definite number of boletas. Example, specifically licenses for lading space in the galleons. In effect, the obras pias functioned as commercial banks and insurance companies. When obras pias was supposedly a church thing, something that is like for charity or whatever. But no, they became commercial banks. Religious corporations and other church organizations also participated in the galleon trade, and in fact did so even before a royal decree gave them this right in 1638. Even the Manila Cathedral had an annual quota of boletas. Clergymen in their individual capacities were stringently prohibited by laws and papal ban from trading, but they did so anyway. It's not just the government or the king that was banning them from basically doing capitalism or trading, whatever it is, but even the church they were under were basically preventing them, well, not preventing them, prohibiting them. But they did so anyway. They did not care. Oh, thank you for the hydrate, Miyaki. Let me just... You can say that they were like basically misbehaving in the eyes of the church and of the king, but they were like, our bones are strong. We can't stop us from doing whatever the fuck we want. Okay. Where were we? Hiding their participation behind lay proxies, meaning since they're not allowed to do trading, they had like other people do the trading for them. In fact, the trading activities of clergymen, both regular and secular, so basically the Spanish and those Filipinos who decided to become church people, were so flagrant that in 1737 the Archbishop of Manila was compelled to expel from the country a large number of priests who had been devoting their time as agents for Dutch, Portuguese, and French merchants. These clerics, however, were not Spaniards. The friars were also monopolists in the internal trade of their districts, and were often powerful enough to fix the prices at which produce was to be bought and sold. Political power. Okay. The early ascendancy of the church over the state was made possible by the success with which friars undertook almost single-handedly the pacification of the country. Since this success was due in large, oh wait, there, oh, hi, hello, oh, Thank you for the follow. I know you love me. Hi, we are currently reading, what do you call this? The Philippines, a past revisited. Oh, happy birthday, David. Enjoy lurking. We are still reading. Renato Constantino's The Philippines, a past revisited. Let us continue. Where are we? The early ascendancy of the church over the state was made possible by the success with which the friars undertook, almost single-handedly, the pacification of the country. Since this success was due in large measure to the natives' acceptance of the new religion, Spanish power in most communities rested on the influence of the religious. The prevalent opinion at that time that in each friar in the Philippines, the king had a captain general and a whole army. And if you could hear that, that is my cat asking for attention. Yes? Hold on. I'm sorry about that. Come on. Come on here. Oh, she's just basically asking for attention. Don't worry, she has food and I don't know what she wants aside from attention. We are going to continue reading. Hi, Nike! Welcome to the stream. Did you hear my cat asking for attention? Chichino, I'm reading history. Do you want to hear her meow? I'm going to take her. Hold on. Chi? Come here. Say hi to them. Or do you want to go out? Oh, it's so sad. Apparently, she was meowing because she wants to be let out of the room. I have closed the door and it's actually not a very heavy door and she can probably push it, but she doesn't want to do that. She wants someone to open it for her. She's a princess. Anyway, let's continue. Maybe we can talk to Chi Chi some other time. She has some other thing to do outside of my room. Again, let's read the quote. In each friar in the Philippines, the king had a captain general and a whole army. It's a recognition of the fact that the religious really were under the priests, the friars, and they are the ones who are keeping them silent because, religion, something, I don't know. I'm not very religious, as you can tell. Moreover, in more than half of the villages in the islands, there was no other Spaniard, and therefore no other colonial authority but the friar. This state of affairs obtained almost to the end of Spanish rule. Union of church and state. Again, we've been talking about how today there is a separation of the church and the state. So now we will see how the church and the state was really intertwined back then. Other factors contributed to friar ascendancy. The friar's knowledge of the land and the people was invariably superior to that of the government functionary. The Spanish alcaldes mayores were dependent on the religious not only because the latter spoke the natives' dialects, yes, as we've talked about earlier, the other Spanish people back then, the ones who were actually sent by the government and not part of the clergy, they didn't really take their time to learn the native language, not dialects, language. I'm very, very strict about that. If we are talking about, let's say, Tagalog and Ilocano and Kapampangan, those are different languages. They're not dialects. I will slap you if you try to say dialect in front of me. Again, so the Spanish priests, they really try to learn the languages of the people. And so if there are officers who were sent by the king, they had no choice but to talk to the friars, and the friars were the ones who were talking to the people, because how the hell are they going to converse with them? So it's not only because of that, but also because the tenure of these government officials was temporary, while that of the parish priest was more or less permanent. A more fundamental basis of the great political power of the religious was the Spanish concept of the union of the church and the state. Because going back to what we have read on our first episode or session of this, remember, the king is more of like, let's conquer lands, let's go to unknown places, and the queen was more like, I want to spread the word of the Lord. And then when they married, because they were two different kingdoms, those two ideals were also married together, and so that is how they ruled, and that is how they ruled upon the lands that they conquered. So there was a concept of union between the church and the state. The friar was entrusted with an ever-growing number of civil duties within the community, until there was no aspect of community life in which he did not have a hand. He was inspector for primary schools and of taxation, president of the Board of Health, of charities, urban taxation, statistics, prisons, formerly president, but lately honorary president of the Board of Public Works. He was a member of the Provincial Board and the Board of Partitioning Crown Lands. He was censor of municipal budget of plays, comedies, and dramas in the native language given at the fiestas. He had duties as certifier, supervisor, examiner, or counselor of matters in regard to the correctness of cedulas, municipal elections, prison food, auditing of accounts, municipal council, the police force, the schools, and the drawing of lots of army service. So, whatever you do, wherever you go, the priest had a hand in it, and they were always the one in charge. Warehouse of faith. Economic power through land holding and through investments in foreign and internal trade, political power through extensive participation in government, and spiritual control over both the native population and fellow Spaniards, all these combine to make the friar the principal figure in each community, and the church the dominant power in the country. As W.L. Schurz says, the colony took on more and more the character of a vast religious establishment. Manila had become a warehouse of the faith, almacén de la fe, from which missionaries issued forth to labor at the conversion of infidels of the surrounding regions. In 1722, there were said to be over 1,500 priests in the islands, and more than the total of the Spanish lay population at that time. So there were more priests than the total of the Spanish lay population. So there was just a heckin' lot of them. Friar supremacy. Friction between the two colonial authorities existed almost from the very start. It was naturally exacerbated by the growing importance and consequent arrogance and abuses of the religious authorities. The friars were always conscious of their indispensability in the perpetuation of Spanish rule. This awareness of their power was aptly summarized in the following boast made by a friar. If the king sends troops here, the Indians will return to the mountains and forests. But if I shut the church doors, I shall have them all at my feet in 24 hours. So they actually know how powerful they are, holding these people at the palm of their hands through religion, compared to the troops who are basically what do you call this, ruling by an iron fist. It's very weird. Official complaints. Again, we're going to read about complaints. We've already done this earlier when it came to them grabbing the land of the natives, but here are some more. Time and again, governors complained of the abuses of the clergy and appealed to the Spanish monarch to curtail their powers. As early as 1592, Governor Dasmariñas was already railing against friar power. Here is what he wrote. And the friars say the same thing, namely that they will abandon their doctrinas or their Christian villages if their power over the Indians is taken away. This power is such that the Indians recognize no other king or superior than the father of the doctrina and are more attentive to his commands than to those of the governor. Therefore, the friars make use of them by the hundreds as slaves, in their rowing, works, services, and in other ways, without paying them, and whipping them as if they were highwaymen. In whatever pertains to the fathers, there is no grief or pity felt for the Indians. But as for some service of your majesty, or a public work in which an Indian may be needed, or as for anything ordered from them, the religious are bound to gainsay it, place it on one's conscience, hinder it, or disturb everything. And again, for those who are kind of new here, when they're saying Indians, they meant the early Filipinos, because they thought they were in the Indies or something, so they called us Indios. So yeah, just keep that in mind. In 1636, Governor Sebastian Hurtado de Corcuera wrote the king objecting to the increase of the number of religious in the islands. According to him, the friars had reduced the natives to virtual slavery by forcing them to sell to the religious all their rice and cloth at prices set by the latter, who then monopolized the business in these items. And yet, the governor complained when assessments of rice, cloth, and wine were levied on the people by the government. These same friars objected on the ground that the natives were too poor to pay what was demanded. So you see what's in play here. The friars are saying, oh, they're setting so much taxes on them or something. The people are so poor. But why were they so poor? Bessie, why are they so poor? It's because the friars have been the ones who were keeping them poor by forcing them to sell their goods at such low prices to them so that they would benefit from it financially. And then they're going to tell the government that the natives are too poor, they can't pay what you're demanding them. Anyway, as a representative of the government whose concern was the exploitation of the natives, Corcuera was of course merely expressing the resentment of one who had discovered a formidable rival in his colonial appropriation. Like Governor Dasmariñas, he complained to the king that the friars were infinitely more powerful than the crown's representatives. So you see, there's still a lot of rivalry between the representatives of the king and the representatives of the church. They're almost saying the same thing, like, oh, you're abusing the natives. and pointing fingers at each other. Das Marinas, he complained to the king that the friars were infinitely more powerful than the crown's representatives. Gubernatorial casualties. But monastic supremacy was a fact of life that the king's representatives had to live with. Those who dared oppose the religious courted humiliation and even death. Governor Diego de Salcedo was imprisoned by the Inquisition and died a broken man while he was being shipped back to Mexico in 1669. The dispute between church and state flared up with particular violence during the term of Governor Juan de Vargas in the third quarter of the 17th century. When Vargas was no longer governor, his implacable foe, Archbishop Pardo, forced him to stand each day for 4 months in Manila streets wearing sackcloth and with a rope around his neck and a candle in his hand. He too died a prisoner on a galleon bound for Mexico. So as you can see, when they are, fighting back against the churchmen, these other state governors and other who are supposed to be in power because of the king, they just died poor and basically humiliated. And so not a lot of them wanted to oppose them. Governor Fernando Manuel de Bustamante came into conflict with the church when, after finding out that the friars had borrowed heavily from the government and from the obras pias, he ordered them to return the money. The government's assertion of his official authority in this and other matters put him on a collision course with the clergy. Of course, the church was very mad about that because they've been busted and they were like, yo, return this money. This is government money. So the governor's assertion of his official authority in this and other matters put him in a collision course with the clergy. They were basically butting heads. Their mutual hostility culminated in the arrest and imprisonment of the archbishop on charge of having conspired against the government. The friars, at the head of a mob, forced their way into the governor's palace and stabbed Bustamante to death. It was fucking horrifying. Competing exploiters and oppressors. Because, we didn't need just one. We had a lot of them. Up to now, we still do. Not just foreigners, but also people of our skin color. Akron, hi, hello, ara, ara. We are currently reading, yes, we're still reading the same book, the Philippines, past revisited by Renato Constantino, and this model is a customizable Marin Kitagawa model. Obviously, it's not my final model yet. That is yet to come. My model is actually almost done. Like, it's taken a long time getting it done. It's just about to get rigged. And, in a few months, I can't say weeks because I will be debuting with that model in a few months. You will see what I actually look like, and I'm very excited for you to see that. Thank you. But for now, you have this Marin customizable model. Sometimes I also do the chibi Tifa model, but yeah, let us continue. Competing exploiters and oppressors. Of course, there was no lack of complaints to the king from the friars against the civil authorities. The latter's abuses and corruption were just as blatant. The dispute was between competing oppressors and exploiters, with the king sometimes inclined to favor one other times the other. The friars, however, were often as impervious to royal mandates as they were to the rulings of local officials. For example, the king at one time ordered the clergy to stop inducing dying men to bequeath their property to the church. You remember that from like a few pages ago? They were like, yo, that's whack. Stop telling them that they're gonna get to heaven if they give their land to you while they're dying. But as you already know, they did not truly follow that. They were not following any of the rules that are given to them by the king. Or even the Pope, they're not following any of those. He also warned them against forcing women to render domestic service in their convents, and instructed the priests not to charge the people for the sacraments administered to them. So that was not allowed, but they kept on doing it. That's a theme here. These and other similar orders were issued in response to numerous complaints about their conduct, but the friars paid scant attention to such royal admonitions. Again, they were just doing whatever the hell they wanted. Conflict over land titles. To curb the land grabbing that we were talking about, propensities of the friars, the king ordered at various times the examination of land titles. Such investigations had minimal effect, for some religious orders either forged land titles or simply refused to show evidence of ownership, claiming ecclesiastical immunity. As early as 1578, the crown ordered the governor-general and the president of the royal audiencia to examine land titles in the islands. Nothing, however, came of this, as usual. In 1697, an oidor, Juan Sierra, came all the way from Mexico charged with the task of determining the validity of the title to all lands in the colony. They're like, yo, all these land titles seem whack. We need to get them checked. So they got this guy, Juan Sierra. The friars vehemently refused to show their titles to Sierra. They're like, no, we're not even showing you anything, claiming exemption. They presented their case to the royal audiencia, which promptly ruled against them. The royal audiencia was like, oh hell no, we're not exempting you. The friars then appealed to the Archbishop Camacho, but the latter was somewhat hostile to other religious orders because of their refusal to submit to episcopal visitation. Because, you know, the thing that we talked about earlier, there were different religious orders and they didn't really necessarily like each other because they see each other as competitors. When they saw that they could not expect anything from Camacho, the friars turned to Bishop Gonzalez of Nueva Cáceres. Gonzalez took their side, but the audiencia subsequently ruled against them. However, Shera was later replaced by another visitador. And when we say visitador, these are people who are sent by the king so that they would check if everyone is like doing what they're supposed to do. And this one is named Don Juan Ozeta y Oro, who proved more tractable. The conflict between the civil authorities and the friars over land titles dragged on for many years, with the friars successfully parrying every attempt of the government to make them submit to its authority. So, the friars were just basically wilding. They're like, no, I will not submit. Oh, I see that. Oh, hold on. Oh, Meowkey redeemed. Meowkey, you are a very, very good boy. Now we are going to continue reading just as soon as I find where is that. Hold on. Oh yeah, there we go. So, as we were talking about, they were really coming into conflict with the government. And you would think that they're against the government, not against, but like they were having conflict with them. But for sure, they were like in good terms with the Pope. Apparently not. The religious orders also came into conflict with the Pope over their refusal to submit themselves to the authority of the bishops. Again, they were fucking wilding back then. The friars claimed that they were under the exclusive control of the superiors of their own orders. Inasmuch as this was merely an intramural between two sectors of the Spain clergy, it is of little concern to us until such time as the dispute began to involve the native priests, from individual to common grievance. During the early years of Spanish rule, most of the abuses committed by the friars were incidental to their facilitation and their role in resettling their converts in more compact communities. You know how they're like, oh, y'all are in different places and there's so few of us, so now we have to put you in a tighter space so we could like watch over you. Such abuses were therefore committed by them in their individual capacities as religious missionaries, and inflicted on natives also as individuals who in some way or another prove recalcitrant or slow to accept the new religion. The work of conversion, however, required a degree of rapport with the natives. They can't just be mean to them. The early missionaries were more earnest among them, at least, because again, we go back to what we were saying earlier, that in the beginning, the missionaries were actually there to do what they're supposed to do, which is to spread the gospel of the Lord or whatever. But later on, they needed more clergymen to send here and to other colonies to keep them like pacified. So all of these other people who were not interested in the religion part of it, but in the money aspect, were like, you know what, I'm going to be a priest. And so the quality of priests or clergymen declined a lot. Where were we? So the early missionaries, the more earnest among them at least, applied themselves to learning the language of their flock. So the early ones, they were the ones who were like learning Bisaya, Tagalog, wherever they were assigned to. They made a lot of books and translations and dictionaries because they wanted to actually communicate with the natives. And this is still a tactic that is employed by a lot of religious groups. Like, for example, I think the Mormon, they would actually try to be very fluent in the language of the people where they're assigned. It was kind of like that in the beginning. In the beginning. So they applied themselves to learn the language of the people they are going to Christianize, and even their customs and traditions. And that is why we have like books that basically wrote down things that were before were just passed down through word of mouth. They lived among the people, establishing themselves as the fathers and mentors of the community. At times, they took the side of the natives and tried to mitigate the exactions of the state. Moreover, they did not disturb the traditional hierarchy or authority in the village, but instead worked through the chiefs and established themselves as an additional authority. Acceptance of the Catholic religion meant acceptance of the friar's authority, as well as the development of a measure of personal loyalty to him. Later, when the communities became more established and the administrative prerogatives of the friars increased, greater power, together with the decline of missionary zeal occurring at the time, gave rise to greater abuses. So it started out somewhat positive, but it all went downhill from there. Abuses such as the friars' excessive interference in the natives' daily life, personal insult, corporal punishment such as whipping and lashing of both men and women for the slightest offense, onerous fees for confessions and other religious rites, sexual offenses against native women, and the native's virtual reduction to a slave and servant of the friar. All these were being committed as early as the second or third decade of occupation. So when we say that there were actually good friars who wanted to do what they're supposed to do, that didn't last long. The Spanish were here for 333 years. How many decades is that? 33 decades and 3 years. But only on the second and third decades, they were already abusing the people. These wrongdoings were still inflicted on and also accepted on an individual basis, and they varied in intensity and frequency depending on the personality of each priest. Furthermore, since punishments were meted out in a variety of individual offenses, there were no common grievances strong enough to call forth united action. Although there is no doubt that resentments were building up. So you have to keep in mind that back then, they didn't have what we have now, the internet, where if a priest did something wrong, he can easily post on Facebook or on Twitter, and everyone would be aware of it, and everyone's gonna be collectively mad, cancel them, put them on trial. But back then, if a priest abuses a person and they were the ones in power, this person would be afraid to tell other people that they're being abused. And if they're not speaking out, not a lot of people would know about it. They were not able to band together to make it apparent that it's a common grievance. It's not an isolated situation that they're being abused. So it took a long time for them to unite and band together, although a lot of resentment was already building up. Transformation in consciousness. So when did it all change? When the religious orders began to acquire property, their abuses took on a different complexion. As landlords, they became economic exploiters whose abuses threatened the economic survival of the natives. Oh, thank you for the stretch, Emmy. Let me just... My neck. Let us continue. Hold on, let me find my stuff. Such abuses were no longer inflicted by an individual on separate individuals. So it's not isolated cases anymore. The abuses were not in hiding. This was daylight highway robbery or something. Neither were they occasional or dependent on a particular friar. Exploitation was basic and permanent and enforced by an institution on groups of men constituting practically the entire community. Moreover, this kind of exploitation could not be justified in any way as part of the friars' religious mission. All these factors transformed isolated resentments into common and bitter grievances that erupted in revolts against the friars. Because in the beginning, when they were like abusing the people individually, like one on one, physically, and like cursing at them, beating them, sexually abusing them, sometimes they would justify it as they were sent by the Lord there. That is the will of the Lord. And they were just enforcing discipline as the Lord would have wanted. But when it came to the point where they were already exploiting the natives economically, that was the time when people were like, wait, this is not part of any religious mission. How can this be the Lord's what do you call this, will? Like, there was no connect at all. They can see that it is plainly exploitation. And that is when the revolts began against the friars. That native disaffection with the religious orders had profoundly material basis, is proved by the fact that discontent exploded in revolts precisely in areas where friars were known to hold large tracts of agricultural land. So the areas that we've talked about earlier in the provinces of Cavite, Laguna, Manila, Bulacan, and Morong, now Rizal, the religious owned more than half of the total agricultural land. And if you think about it, knowing that they owned half of it is already very bad. You have to think about the fact that they're not even supposed to own any of it, according to the king and according to the Pope. No one let them. It is not mere coincidence that these provinces experienced many agrarian uprisings and became the strongholds of Philippine Revolution. As John Foreman succinctly put it, it was not the monk's immortality which disturbed the mind of the native, but their Caesarism which raised his ire. The grounds of discord was always more infinitely material than sentimental. Objective changes in the existing relationship led to changes in the perception of this relationship. In the case of the friars and the natives, when the supportive relationship actually began to wane as a consequence of blatant economic excesses that could no longer be legitimized by religious sentiments, certain demands overlooked or justified as return favors in the past began to be perceived as intolerably abusive impositions. Because again, back then they were thinking, oh, whatever the priests were doing, it was justified. Or no, we are doing this as a return of favor because they were looking after our souls. Those were things that they used to justify the abuses with when it was like just personal, one-on-one. But when it became a more economic thing, they began to realize that those other things that they were doing in the past, oh, those were definitely red flags. Just like when you are in a relationship and you're basically making excuses for your girlfriend or boyfriend, saying like, oh no, he's just like that, and like, he's just shy, he just doesn't like talking to people, that's why he's not good at socializing, blah blah blah, or he was just tired, blah blah blah, and then later on you will realize, oh no, those were red flags. Basically, that's what happened here. From accessory to principal apparatus. To summarize, the attitude of the natives to the church in the course of its economic and political ascendancy changed from initial obedience due to awe and fear to loyalty and subservience arising from acceptance of the Catholic religion and experience with the power of priests within the colonial hierarchy. but accompanied by personal resentments to generalized or group hostility because of common experience with economic exploitation by the friars, and finally to the violently anti-friar sentiments of the masses during the revolution, which we will talk about in chapters 9 and 10, which resulted in demands for their expulsion and in the rise of an indigenous church. It is very clear that this transformation in the realm of consciousness was a response to a material stimulus. The transformation of the church from a colonial accessory to the principal apparatus of colonial appropriation and exploitation. And that ends chapter 6. We are now in part 2. We have finished the first part of this book. How are you, my ducklings? Are you still there? Are you alive? Are you listening? How are y'all doing? Hold on, let me just get some water. All right. Oh. So here's the thing. It's almost 11 in the evening, and I've been reading for 2 hours. I think we can stop our stream for now. But before that, let me just tell you about our schedule for the next week, for this week actually, since it's already Monday today. Tomorrow, which is Tuesday at 8 p.m., if things go well, we will be playing Fall Guys, and I'll be playing with the usual people, Myon, Moshi. We'll see if Ling will play. I think Aya will play as well, because Fall Guys will be free tomorrow. Yay! And then on Wednesday, if I am awake early in the morning, I'm going to do a learning stream, Duolingo, and if I'm not awake at 9 a.m., I will be very, very disappointed in myself. But also, we will reschedule in the evening, as usual, like I did today, because earlier I was supposed to stream at 9 a.m. But since that didn't happen and I had work in the afternoon, I had no choice but to reschedule at 9 p.m. But yeah, Duolingo on Wednesday, and on Thursday, I will be playing Tukoni at 9 p.m. I will be finally playing it because I've downloaded it along with other games. I've bought quite a few games that I haven't played yet. We will try to get through that list. On Friday, I don't think I will be having a stream unless I wake up really early, but we will see. But yes, Moshi Vienna will be here on Friday. So although I don't have a scheduled stream, who knows? We might decide to stream together. Same goes for Saturday. Sunday, I'm not yet sure. We might stream. I'll talk to her about it. So yeah, if I disappear from the 24th to 28th, that just means that I am having quality time with Moshi. So please do not worry. Don't worry about me. Don't worry about her, because I don't think she's gonna be able to stream as well since she's gonna be here. And if you have messages for her, you can tell me. So yes, that would be our schedule for this week, and I hope I'll fall asleep early, because if not, I might play some other games. Did you even enjoy listening to me just read history and basically being like your history marites? Thank you for the redeems and for staying here with me. I would just like to share this thing that I read in Twitter. Oh, you're welcome, Emmy. There's this tweet that I've read in Twitter saying that people are like disregarding streams that are like, I don't know, 9 or 12 people watching them. But if you think about it, like, how easy would it be to actually get, like right now there are 9 viewers, how easy is it in real life to get 9 people to hang out with you and just listen to you read a history book? I mean, that's wild. There's not that many people who would be like, hey, let me just sit here and listen to you read for 2 hours straight. That's so fucking wild. And also, there's something that I would like to share with you. I am on this project. Like, it's still in the works. There is no script yet, but I will be doing some voice acting. I cannot reveal the I cannot reveal the specifics yet, but I think I can say that I'll be voice acting in something that is horror. It's going to be very short. Oh, Emmy saw it. So, I will not tell you about my character. It's going to be a surprise. And I'm not going to tell you the channel of the person yet because I don't think they're promoting it yet. It's still under work. So please wait for it. I'm trying to build my portfolio when it comes to voice acting because I don't know, it's one of my dreams to actually get casted for any sort of voice acting roles. When I was in college and I was like looking for part-time jobs, I actually auditioned for a VA position, but I don't think I had the skills yet back then. I was not as milky as I am right now. And it was for kids, so I think my voice just doesn't fit kids shows. Which is weird because I actually studied education for teaching in early grades. Like my age range is kinder to grade 2. So I'm like, why am I not say so enough? But yeah, I will be doing some voice acting, and if ever you see any projects that are looking for VTubers or even non-VTubers for voice acting, I'm not even here for like the pay. Like the pay, it can be like, I don't know. It can be like Valorant Battle Pass or whatever. I would say yes to it as long as it say so. Like I can't really do lewd stuff because I want to put something in my portfolio. Although I can definitely do like lewd voices, I'd rather not. I won't do lewd or anything that is racist, or I won't say things that I wouldn't say in real life to other people, except for like, horror stuff. Like I would eat your spleen or pancreas or something like that. But I wouldn't say slurs. Yeah, that's where I draw the line. I will not say slurs. I will not say anything that's racist or homophobic, transphobic, and anything in that umbrella. But yeah, if you see anyone recruiting for voice actors, I can do quite a variety of voice. Like, I know everyone is very used to my voice as like a mommy voice, but it's not limited to that. Like, as you can see, I have my gamer girl voice redeem. I can also do little boy voice. Like, I've been trying to do venti lines. Wait, are we going to devolve into uh, me doing Genshin voice lines? No, we're not. Say so, mommy dragon. Yes, I'm very, very say so. What are you saying? People always think that I am a lewd person. It's just that I'm not lewd. I just can discuss things that people are not used to discussing, like without any lewd connotations. Like there was a time I remember that I was telling my chat, guys, that's not how the hymen works, that's not how vagina works. You're not supposed to do it like that. But that's in an educational context. Yes, I'm very wholesome. What are you saying? I'm a teacher. Myeon, you know I am. Say so. Stop it, Myeon. You have nothing on me, Myeon. I have stuff. I know your internet history. Do not test me. Also, aside from that project, I'm also working on another project. Oh my god, this I'm very, very, very excited about. It's a project with people that I love. You know, the people that I always hang out with, collaborate with. We're doing something bigger than ourselves, and I'm very, very excited about it. Nervous even. And yeah, I hope it goes well. I would love to tell you all about it very, very soon. And yes, anything else, because a lot has happened since I started falling behind my schedule. Because it's just that sometimes I am not in the headspace to do a schedule. And yeah, there's a lot of updates. I even have an update regarding Moshi Vienna. I cannot tell you yet, but be very, very excited. We're giving her sort of a makeover. And maybe she would tell you when the right time comes. I don't know if she'd tell you about it when she comes over here. Yes, she's gonna visit me. I think you all know that Moshi and I have known each other way before we started VTubing. Like I got into VTubing because of her. What are those eyes, Meowki? Hold on, let me just change the scenery so that it's not very, very hold on, where is that? Is it this one? Yes, it's this one. Yay, this is a lot better. What was I saying? Oh yeah. So yeah, I've known Moshi for a long time, and although we don't live near each other, like she actually has to travel for around 6 to 8 hours. No, 8 hours, yes. 8 hours by bus, multi-transfers. Just to hang out with me. We live that far. Yes, so I will try my best to get her to stream on my channel. Because I'm not sure if she can like log on here, and I'm not sure how we're going to stream at the same time. So yes, I'll just get her to go here. We will set up her stuff, or she can use some of my unused models. So if there is anything, oh yes, if there is anything that you would like us to do, like play a certain game or do certain questions, we can probably do it by the weekend. So just hit me up on Twitter, just tag me or comment in my Facebook posts. I have been really I've been bullying her on Facebook. Anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, it's 11 o'clock, and I'm very, very glad and grateful that you all stayed here with me. I hope to see you soon. See you tomorrow. Yeah, right? Tomorrow? Am I right? Am I right? Tomorrow? Yes, I do have a schedule tomorrow for Fall Guys. Myeon will be there. Myeon, right? Right, right, right. We're playing Fall Guys. Um, I actually don't know how to play it. So we will be having a lot of fun. My first time playing Fall Guys. And we might soon have a community event where we will be trying to make those stages and getting people to try them. Makunawa's Castle, yay, let's go. So that's it for today. Let's look at who we can raid. Who is on right now? Oh, let's try to raid Marcel. He is a carabao. He is our national animal, right? Is it still a carabao? Like the national animal? I'm not even sure anymore because things change. Okay, let's raid. Where is he? Oh, I can't find him there. Oh, he's not? Okay, let's just raid Manika Kuramu. She is a doll. Let's start the raid. I don't know what she's playing right now. That is all for now. And as usual, au revoir, adios, annyeong, zaijian, sayonara, sampai jumpa, paalam, bibi bye bye, Bakunawa raid. Let's go now.